I used to think my experience learning Spanish in college was incredibly unimportant and very irrelevant to the language learner that I am today. But after a lot of reflection, I'm starting to realize that a lot of my interests in the Spanish language, the way that I study, what I do like to do, what I don't like to do, has been heavily influenced by my formal Spanish classes in college. That's why in this video, I'm going to be talking about my experience learning Spanish in college. And also, what were the classes like? What topics did we cover? How did I study? And my overall opinions on these formal Spanish classes. What was the good and what was the bad? So how did I end up taking Spanish classes in college? So where I was studying at, there was a second language requirement. So to graduate, I had to take another language. And there was various ones to choose from, but I stuck with Spanish because I already took Spanish in middle school and in high school, so I already had a base knowledge of the language. To fully satisfy the second language requirement of my Spanish classes, I was going to have to pass the Lpe exam. And this is the language proficiency exam, which you would take at the end of your last semester of your Spanish classes. So we had from like 1001 to 1004. So at the end of 1004, you would take this Lpe exam, which consisted of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So according to the campus website, the Lpe exam is a proficiency test which evaluates the student's ability to read and listen at the intermediate high level, as defined by the ACTFL, which is the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. They have their own website, you can go check it out. And to write and speak at the intermediate to mid-level, also defined by the ACTFL. When I first saw the curriculum of my Spanish classes, I didn't think that it was going to get me to the intermediate to mid-level. I thought I was going to be completely fluent in Spanish because of all the different topics that we're going to be studying and the different methods that we're going to be using to study as well. Technically, these were intermediate classes, but in my head, I was thinking if I'm going to be spending all this time studying and also spending so much money on these Spanish classes, then I better be at an advanced level. So what were the resources that they gave us to study for these Spanish classes? First of all, I probably shouldn't say gave us, but told us to buy this Spanish dictionary, and the other was this quick guide to Spanish grammar, this cheat sheet for conjugaciones de verbos. The main study resource was our textbook. So this is Gente Nivel Básico. And I took 3 semesters in college, and I'm pretty sure we used the same textbook throughout all those classes. I'm pretty sure. For my first semester, my Spanish class was actually a combination of 2 different semesters because I already took Spanish in high school. I did not have to repeat taking a completely beginner class, even though I'm pretty sure that I needed it. We had 3 or 4 classes during the week for 50 minutes long. I can't remember which one it was, 3 or 4 days. And my professor was a native Spanish speaker, but she mostly used a neutral accent with us. So it wasn't like it was very difficult to understand her when she was speaking Spanish. But even in this class, she wasn't speaking completely in Spanish all the time. That hardly ever happened. Most of these classes consisted of a professor teaching us some grammar concept on the board or on a slideshow, and then also explaining some cultural topics as well about different countries in Latin America. And if we weren't doing that, then we were probably reading some article or something like that, and then I would discuss that with my classmate in Spanish or Spanglish usually. So let's check out what some of these would be. So in our textbook, we did have a whole bunch of different sections. So this is Gente que estudia español, and the objectives are talking about oneself, spelling names, countries, identifying people and places. Then for cultural, they want you to learn about the Spanish-speaking world, Puerto Rico, Hispanics in the United States. And then for the grammar here, we have the present tense of ser and llamarse, gender and number articles, gente con gente, gente de vacaciones, gente de compras, gente en forma, gente en la casa y en el trabajo. So a lot of these kind of have the same structure. They have different tasks, objectives of that particular chapter. They have grammatical, functional goals. then the vocabulary goals, and strategy. Let's take a look at chapter 2, gente con gente, so you can get like a little idea. So there's like a lot of different exercises and a lot of different examples. This is de quien, about whom, hablan. There's different example sentences. And then there's also a lot more written exercise that you can do. There's a decent amount of reading. And then here we have more gramática en contexto. So it's going to explain more of the grammar. So here we have adjetivos, adjectives, el nombre, la nacionalidad, different questions for talking about nationality. So where are you from? Es mexicano, es de Mexico. This section I liked a lot as well. We have estrategias para la comunicación oral. So this has a lot of different questions here in the to form. Gente que lee, estrategias para leer. And then also there's a little reading here about un pintor mexicano, Francisco Toledo. And these are the pages where I definitely lived and breathed during my Spanish classes in college. So vocabulary lists, and then also some pages on different grammar concepts. In this case, we have nacionalidad y origen, y familia, y relaciones, números, adjetivos, la personalidad. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of detail in that textbook, but during our classes, we did not discuss every single detail at all. There's only so much that you can fit in a 50-minute class. And what they tried to do was have us speak for at least I think it was 15 to 10 minutes. And even within this 10 to 15 minute time frame, we weren't speaking consistently, basically ever, and it was Spanglish. We were speaking in Spanish and English, or we were just talking about whatever. One thing that really annoyed me during these classes was when our professor would ask us questions about what she just went over and nobody would ever respond. And this was so painful because it made the class drag so much longer because she would stand there and wait for us to respond, even if it was something simple. So that's when I started to raise my hand a lot and answer questions because I just wanted the class to go faster. So that was the first semester of my Spanish classes, and the last 2 semesters basically followed the same exact pattern as far as what we did in class. One difference was the type of professors. So my first professor, she was a native Spanish speaker, and the last 2 professors, they were non-native Spanish speakers. There wasn't a big difference in teaching styles in between my professors. They all followed the same exact structured syllabus for that particular class, so I just didn't really distinguish between their styles at all. These Spanish exams were quite hard, even the quizzes, because the quizzes, they were heavily focused on grammar. So it was just writing out a sentence and trying to make sure you have the right verb conjugation and that you have the right sentence structure. And I was not good at that at all because grammar was not my thing. No matter how hard I studied for these quizzes and even for my exams, the grammar sections were always the hardest for me. They took me the longest to complete, and it's also the sections where I got the most points off of. So when I wasn't in class, what was my learning strategy? How was I studying for these exams and for these quizzes? And the answer to that was I was just doing the basics. So I was just making sure that I was completing our homework assignments, and that was basically it. It wasn't anything crazy. I wasn't doing anything extra or far beyond because I had no idea of how to study for any of my classes in college, and especially not for languages because I was never taught how to do that before. Basically, all of my homework assignments were all online. They had to be submitted online as well. They would give us like a reading assignment from that textbook that I showed you earlier, and then we would have to respond based off, whatever specific topic that it was. For example, I wrote about la complejidad de la salud. These were called composiciones, and I got partnered up with another student in my class so they could correct what I did. So this was actually very, very structured. There was actually, let's see here, I have 10 different questions that my partner would have to answer regarding this composición. So for example, did it have in between 400 to 500 words? Are my ideas clear? And then they would also have to mark where I had the introduction, the body paragraph, and the conclusion. There's also some other questions as well, and these were all in Spanish, and they had to respond in Spanish as well. Then I would have to do the same exact thing, but for their composición. I also had to write ensayos, which is basically just just me writing about one particular topic again, and then submitting that to my professor, and then she would give me notes on what she thought was good and what she thought was bad. This one is about cómo la tecnología ha mejorado y cambiado educación. And I definitely have a whole bunch of grammar mistakes in each of these ensayos y composiciones. It's actually pretty fun looking back at it now because I haven't looked at this since my last Spanish class in college, and that was 3 years ago. And I can definitely tell how much better that I've gotten. Apart from those homework assignments, I also had to do a decent amount of video recordings of myself talking in Spanish with one of the students in class, or two of them, so we could have like a group of 3 to 4 people talking in Spanish about a particular topic. Now, these were also really funny to me because most of the time we always use scripts, right? So we weren't actually having like a normal conversation where we were just kind of speaking what was coming out of our heads right in that moment. That happened rarely. I'm laughing about it now years later, but if you are taking Spanish classes right now, make sure you don't do that. Do it all from memory. So to study for my examinations and my quizzes, this is literally what I did. I opened up my textbook, I went to the page where there was vocab lists like this, and I would just read it over and over and over again until I had them, memorized. Or at least at this time, I thought I was memorizing the vocabulary. Then I would also do the same thing with any reading assignments that we had. I would read them over and over again and just cram as much information as I could into my brain. Because on these exams, we would have different sections. So you would have one that is just reading based. So you would read a few paragraphs, then you would have to answer some questions in response to what that reading was about. And sometimes those readings were connected to what we studied, like in our textbook for our homework assignments, and sometimes, they weren't. The ones that tripped me up the most were always the ones about art. When we had to write about art, I did not like that at all. I did not know any art vocabulary whatsoever. I didn't care about studying anything about art. And even today, it's kind of about the same. Then of course we had our grammar section where you would have some like verb conjugation or some prompt or something like that. And then the main goal was writing down that sentence as correct as possible. And then we also had a listening section, which I always did terribly on because I was just guessing every single thing that I heard, and I had no strategy for increasing my listening comprehension during this time. So I really wasn't focused on increasing my listening comprehension at all, apart from studying those vocab lists. That was my method of trying to listen better. If I study a whole bunch of vocabulary lists, I understand what that word means, then I'm gonna be able to hear it really easily. And that didn't happen. At the very least, I started to listen to this one podcast, but it wasn't to study. I don't even know how I came across it, but I just started listening to it because I like video games, and it is called Gamers RD Podcast. They talk a lot about what is going on with the gaming industry, and they do different reviews on different video games. But they don't just talk about that, they talk about different TV shows and also different movies as well. Besides trying to cram vocab lists and grammar concepts into my brain, one other method of studying that I did during my time learning Spanish in college was going to office hours. So I actually started to go to speak with my professor during office hours, I think during my second semester, because I had different questions, and that actually helped me out a decent amount. But it wasn't for that long. It was maybe like a few simple questions on what does this mean? Because my curiosity was really high. I wanted to understand basically as much as I could. And the other way I tried to learn and improve my Spanish skills, apart from my homework assignments, was actually joining a Spanish group. So there's one group that would always go to this one cafe on campus, and they would speak in Spanish. So there's all different levels. And I joined there for about a few days, but I got really embarrassed because I thought they were a lot better than I was. And I got really unmotivated extremely fast. And then I stopped doing that. I ended up passing my Lpe exam, so I satisfied that second language requirement so I could graduate college. And I wasn't very happy with the results because I crammed a lot, right? And if I cram, that means I should get an A. For me, this Lpe exam basically was all my previous examinations, but just like twice as long. The speaking part was incredibly funny for me because of how short it was. So you had to actually schedule your own little session of when this would be, and you're just sitting in front of, it could be like a native Spanish speaker or a non-native Spanish speaker, and then you had to pick out different prompts, like paper prompts that are right in front of you, and then you just had to respond to those, and that was basically it. It was like 15 minutes. Most people that I talked to thought it was super easy. All right, let's talk about my overall opinion of my Spanish classes during college. So the good and the bad. One of the good things was I increased my vocabulary a lot from all of that cramming that I was doing with the vocab list, and also from a lot of reading, because for the homework assignments, we had to read, a decent amount of passages. So that helped me to build my vocabulary up, even if it was only just like a base knowledge. So I was just mostly reading, what the definition was, or the English translation of that Spanish word. That was mostly what I was doing. I also increased my Spanish reading skills because we had to, consume so much content. And for me, I already like to read, and then combining that with Spanish, that helped me to motivate me a lot, and also increase my written skills as well, because I practice a lot rewriting the same sentence over and over again, trying to get it perfect. They also made us reflect on the videos that we made. So how do we pronounce words, and how do we feel about how fluid we were and things like that. Now on to the bad things. Now I'll say one of the worst things for me was how terrible my study methods were, because they didn't teach us how to learn Spanish, how to learn the language necessarily. They mostly just told us what to study. You have a syllabus, you have quizzes, you have ensayos, you have composiciones, you have different oral presentations as well. Okay, do all these things, and we'll see how well you did, right? I crammed every single semester. I crammed for all my exams. I crammed even for our different video presentations as well, just like studying the vocab list. Okay, these are all the vocab words that I need. All right, let me study these, and then I'm going to try to reproduce that in a very short amount of time. That's one thing that I definitely lacked, and then some things that I've been trying to get away from since I've been out of college as well. Learning how to study Spanish properly, or study Spanish in a way that is most productive for me. Another thing I didn't like is that you could not study what you want. So a lot of what I was writing about, or we were talking about different conversations, I did not care about whatsoever. So that's why for the quizzes or whatever, I never studied for those. But the different oral presentations that we had, I studied them like just for what I would need, but it was anything extra. I wasn't passionate about it. I was just trying to get it done as fast as possible, which is also why I had like those scripts too, so I could just get through it as fast as possible. I also didn't like that there wasn't much opportunity to increase your pronunciation skills, right? Because you're not having like a one-on-one lesson with your professor, unless you go to your office hours. But I don't know how many people are doing that. And also, I don't know how many people are going there just to increase, their pronunciation skills. Also, because when I went to Mexico about, how many months? I think like the same month, or like the month after that I graduated. And I said, oh yeah, I passed my Lpe exam. I'm so fluent in Spanish. I went there and it was terrible because I could barely even construct a sentence properly. My pronunciation was really terrible, and I wasn't really speaking that much. Another thing I didn't like about these Spanish classes at my college was the cost, because they make us pay for 4 semesters, right, of these classes. In my case, I only had to take 3 semesters of these Spanish classes, and for the cost of them, I don't think that you actually receive what you should get, so you can be more of a proficient Spanish learner and language learner. Like I said, I didn't have any study method that was taught to me. I had to figure that all out on my own, and that was just cramming. And then on top of that, I wasn't able to communicate with Spanish speakers after all that studying, after all those classes. But I mostly tried to focus on the good things that I received during my experience learning Spanish at college. Let me know in the comment section below if you have taken formal Spanish classes, and if you have, what did you like about them and what did you not like about them? Also, make sure you check out the links in the description box of this video so you can learn more about my experience learning Spanish. Mi nombre es Josué, esto es Spanish Blueprints y nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.